Okay, I wanted to do a couple things in this very short video. Hope it's very short. And the first one is clarifying when ground combat actually happens. And I'm not talking about what phase it happens. Obviously, it's during the ground combat phase, but when is it required? When are there choices to be made? And who initiates the combat? There was a good comment and discussion back and forth with somebody on my previous video, and I ended up asking a question on BGG, and Mark Herman was kind enough to answer that. So I think this is, I'm hoping, the definitive answer. But the first way that you would be required to have ground combat or deactivate is if you had both enemy units, opposing units in the same hex, and no one moved in to that hex during this particular battle cycle. So they were already there, most likely because of a previous battle situation in the previous cycle. So they're sitting there. The operation player has an activated unit, okay? They have only one choice. They can either initiate the combat, or they deactivate and they lose all further BCMs. So this just disappears. They don't have any left, no matter how many they started with. If they do initiate the combat, they'll use up one BCM. Okay, that's the first way. The second way that combat needs to happen is if this unit entered during the previous movement phase. So operation player was advantage player in this battle cycle. They moved in there. Now they have to conduct an attack. They don't really have a choice, and the big thing is you don't use up a battle cycle movement. So in effect, let's say they were at 2, they moved in, they're now reduced to 1 because you used up a battle cycle movement during the movement phase. Now it's combat phase. You have to attack. You're basically doing that initial entry into that hex, and now you're going to have to attack, but you don't have to use that up. Okay, that's the second type. Now the third would be if I had another unit. Let's say these were already in here previous to this battle cycle. So now I've got another unit, and I move in during the advantage movements phase. This is still the operational player. Now I can choose whether or not to do an attack, and I'll have to expend a BCM to do that. But if I choose not to attack, I still have to reduce the BCM marker. Okay. So it's kind of like a reinforcing situation, but you're still using that BCM up, even though you chose not to attack. Then the other possibility, and this is where you have to make a distinction between operation player, reaction player, and advantage movement player and disadvantage movement player, because there are two separate concepts going on here. And I like what Mark has done with this process, because it really places the onus on the operational player. So you have to think of that in terms of operational behavior, not tactical. So here's the situation. The operational player is sitting here, and now the reaction player, these are both activated units, the reaction player has an activated unit, but they got advantage movement phase. So they are now going to move into this hex, and you think, well, they're going to have to attack, but that's actually not the case. There's still the choice for the operational player during the ground combat phase. the operational player can decide, oh, he moved in here, I'm now going to attack. That's my option to do that. If that doesn't happen, then the reaction player, even though they moved in first, the reaction player can say, okay, I have to attack. Basically, that's kind of a counterattack situation or a blunting attack. You can call it whatever you want. But if I don't do that attack, then they have to deactivate. And this is where it's interesting, because you could get into that situation we talked about as one of the first examples, because ground combat phase would be over and you're left with 2 units from opposing sides in the same hex. There is a withdrawal idea that the US could do here, but they're going to pay for it, because if they're in this hex, and this is where it's kind of cool in some of these decisions you have to make, and some of the decisions that are forced by the opposing player. Because as the reaction player, I moved in here during the advantage movement phase. Now, there's a decision to be made, beside the fact, okay, if the US decided not to attack, and the Japanese said, I'm not attacking either, I'm just going to deactivate. So now it's the disadvantage movement phase. Well, technically they can withdraw, but if they withdraw, they're going to lose a step, and they're going to have to deactivate. And what's even cooler, they cannot, because the Japanese went in, I didn't place this the first time, but that's what would happen if the Japanese moved in here. They would have to place this. So what's cool about it is the US can't be sneaky and say, oh, well, I'm going to withdraw, I'll take the step loss and I'm going to go here. Well, they can't, just in case that was a crucial hex that needed to be captured. So you think of it as an operation where the Japanese are coming this way, the US might be coming this way, this direction, and you have this hex that's contested, this part of the operational area that's contested, and when this being the goal. Well, there's a lot of decisions to be made, and withdrawing is, yes, it's a possibility, but you're going to lose that unit. I mean, and if you have a 28-day operation and you've got to get there, you're not going to be retreating and deactivating. You're going to have to try to forge ahead, figure it out. So if those units are left in the hex and the US doesn't withdraw during their disadvantage movement phase, they're going to have to stay there. And then regardless of who gets advantage movement or disadvantage movement on the next battle cycle, something's going to have to give here, since this is still activated. So it's really important to walk yourself through these 3 ideas first, and then understand that if the situation isn't presented with any of these 3, it means most likely that the reaction player moved in during the advantage movement phase, and that still gives the option for the US, the operational player, to make an attack in that hex, even though the Japanese were the ones who moved in there. So that's I think the toughest thing for me to wrap my head around when I first started getting into the ground combat. Some things are obvious. I mean, if as you're moving along and you're the operational player and you're moving into that hex because you need to get there, whatever, and you don't have a lot of time, it's obvious. You move in and you're going to attack. But there are situations where it's much more fluid, and you have to think about how this fits together in terms of operational, and who's on the aggressor side and who's trying to delay or defend. So I think keeping that in mind, all of this makes total sense. It's just that it's a little bit out of our normal paradigm of hex encounter land war games. So keep that in mind as you're doing that. I know that was a 10-minute explanation, but I think it's so important to understand that. And if I'm wrong, I hope I'm not wrong, after talking to or going back and forth with Mark on BGG. I think that's how that operates. So the only other thing I wanted to check in with was just thank everyone for following along with some of my, well, especially the review that I wrote. It's gotten some pretty positive responses, and also the series and the tutorials. I actually, I didn't do a lot with my channel for a long number of months for various reasons. And then when I got back into it, it was mainly because of this puppy right here. And I think the response to Pacific War has been so tremendous, this new edition. It's gotten a lot of old players like me into it, and a lot of new players. And I think because of that, it's just, there's been a lot of positive response to my videos, because this is popular right now. And so I was probably about 70 a few weeks ago, and now I'm over 300 subscribers, so that's pretty cool. But that means I probably have to start looking at 1, better lighting, 2, better sound. I need to get a mic hooked up here so it's more consistent sound. And also better, smaller tripod that I want to use to place on board. So I we'll be looking into those 3 things just to create a little bit better experience watching the videos. I'm probably not going to go crazy, but I appreciate the response, and my main purpose for this is just to keep communicating with people who enjoy some of the things that I'm enjoying, or have questions about some of the things that we're all playing. And some of that back and forth, that's really the best chance for getting the most out of these simulations. So that part is what I've enjoyed the most. I know there's been some mistakes. Some were just stupid mistakes that as I was replaying certain things. But sometimes I've discovered some issues where I didn't actually get the rule right. And so I've been appreciative of people saying, hey, take a look at this, because I think that's done this way or whatever. So that's fantastic. And we'll see what the road brings in the next few weeks. But thanks a lot, and keep playing your Pacific War, among other things that are out there that are so much fun to enjoy. Catch you later.